In this episode, we learn how to do good, how to make money, and how to change the world all at the same time. Welcome to episode number 12 of the Jason Croft Show, where we're talking to Keith Thode of AdvanceNet Labs. Keith is absolutely amazing. Just an incredible person when you sit there and sit across from him. You know, he's one of these people that just exude goodness and confidence and intelligence, and you just want to know more from him. I had the privilege of interviewing him at an event, and I was just blown away with what he's doing with his company. His approach to doing good in this world is genius, which I'm so behind and so in support of. Not just doing good and helping out and giving. You know, we all agree with that. That's great. But he's got this great blend of for-profit with non-profit, the corporate sector, helping them really, and I mean that when I say helping them do better in the world, because he's got systems in place and he's developing more all the time so that it makes financial sense for these corporations to do good in this world. He dives into that in the interview and so much more. But I'm excited about this, anxious to share this with you. Check it out. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for showing up. My name is Jason Croft. For those of you I don't know or know very well, I host a show called Startup Dallas and a new show called The Jason Croft Show. As obnoxious as that is, that's why I named it that. And I host Big DOCC, the Open Coffee Club up north. So all these fun community things going on, and that's why I'm here. And now, most importantly, let's talk to Mr. Keith Thode. Keith, you have an incredible background and then current endeavor that is just mind-blowing. So I'm going to let you introduce some of those current initiatives, and then I'll kind of take us back a little bit and go through some of those things that have led up to what you're doing today. But talk to me a little bit about AdvanceNet Labs and what you've got going on.
Great, sure. Well, AdvanceNet Labs is a nonprofit organization, and it's basically built on the premise that the corporate world has developed these technologies and processes that have really raised the standard of living for most of society. Mm-hmm. So how do you take those same capabilities and apply them to people who have been left behind or affected by a tragedy? How do you take those things and apply them to the social sector?
Right. What would, give me an example of what something like that would be? What kind of technology?
Sure. So for example, right now we've taken you think about how corporations train their people. Mm-hmm. You know, corporations don't bring everybody to the same room and teach them from a manual every time, right? And if a new employee gets together, they can't start the company working at the company until the manager can come down and teach them, right? I mean, They have systems for training people and keeping track of who learned what. So we went and acquired Cornerstone On Demand, one of the world's largest learning management systems, and took $1 million gift from them and a couple $100,000 of pro bono consulting from Accenture, and took that learning system and made it work for workforce development, for after-school programs, for providing education to those who need it.
That's fantastic.
Yeah,
man. There's so many levels to that I want to dive into, because I think it's answering so much more than a handout, and just this giving. That it's so much more empowering than that. But before we dive into that, let's go back a little bit. Give me that road and that history that is Keith Thode.
Sure.
What's led you into this world? I mean, really into this social entrepreneur space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, from the time I started working, I really chose jobs because I wanted to earn enough, but that I learned enough at the same time that when I got older, actually my dream, I was a few years older even than I am now, that I could use my business skills to help people in need. That was really always my goal.
And that's almost the
traditional thought to the whole thing too, is that that's the only way to do it, right? Let me work in corporate America, the normal thing, and then maybe one day when I retire, I can start giving back.
Right, and it gets very hard. I talk to a lot of people, and it gets very hard to get off that cycle. Right, you get used to a paycheck at a certain level, and you get used to a certain kind of life. And but I was very fortunate to be forced with a choice in my early 30s. Just about my 30th birthday, actually, I was working. I had a pretty successful career in enterprise technology, so working with large computer systems that companies used, and I took a job that I was working in a job that I knew wasn't really my passion. But at that company, one of the other employees said, "Oh, you should take this software and donate it into the not-for-profit world." And I happened to be an executive that volunteered my time at the foundation of the company. Okay. And so when that project came across, so I started volunteering on it.
And what kind of software?
Yeah.
What did it do?
Yeah, so this software is called supply chain management software.
Okay.
So if you think about how, my expertise was, in making cell phones and, these type of things of how do you go from raw plastic pellets and pieces of copper to having one of these at the store when Jason wants to buy one, but not 26 sitting around and getting old, right?
Right.
It's the same thing that the first one costs $600 and then a year later it's worth $99, right? Those type of technologies. So we started looking at things like people who make mac and cheese, right? How do you take the same system? So when a big company starts with a K makes mac and cheese all day long, right? And what happens when they make too much, or when the box comes out the wrong color blue, right? How do you provide the same systems that take that normal mac and cheese and get it to the grocery store? How do you take it when it's extra and get it just as efficiently to a food bank and out to a homeless shelter?
Oh, interesting.
Right. And when you can do that, when you really can bring that business and technology discipline, we figured out for those companies, we could actually make it more profitable for them to donate that food instead of throwing it away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And how does that work?
So there's some intricacies in the tax law because the government doesn't want companies throwing all their stuff away. So they say, okay, we'll give you a little extra credit if you give it to a qualified organization. Now, in the past, that was kind of a nice incentive, but for the companies, still, it was such a pain to make all these phone calls and have these nonprofits show up or not, and all the time it's costing them money.
Or dump it.
Yeah, or just dump it, get it off the books, and be done.
Yeah.
Well, when we used technology, instead of it being now dumping it is its own piece of work, right? So when we use technology to create this highly effective system, all of a sudden for the company, it became the easiest thing to do with its extra mac and cheese, right? And then by doing it so efficiently, we actually can maximize what's called their net operating profit after taxes, right? So it actually impacted their bottom line positively. Well, then they really started to give, right? Right. So those systems, like over the time of our talk, over 1 million pounds of food is going to flow over the systems we built.
Good grief.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and it's getting the corporate sector really aligned with the social sector.
And so while you were at that corporate job still, that's when you started doing that or being involved with that there at that corporate job still.
Yeah, so I was volunteering my time, and but the company had actually conscripted some employees to work on the assignment.
Okay.
But as software companies come and go, its fortune started to turn a little, so that team had to leave. And so the foundation head said, well, what are we going to do if we don't have our software people? And they said, well, Keith's working on it for free. Maybe he'd work on it full-time for not very much. And that's what I did. I ended up joining the foundation and then spinning off and creating actually a whole separate organization to produce those innovations. It's called Aid Matrix.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So what was the next step in that? And in spinning that off, did you take on clients and get revenue that way through it so you could kind of scale this whole thing?
Absolutely. So under the nonprofit auspices, it took us over a 15-year journey. We kept adding food banks one by one. We grabbed the National Food Bank Network so we could help a lot of people at once with that. Added food bank networks in the UK. We had started doing disaster relief work. I got to be a first responder in the earthquake right after Haiti, the earthquake that hit Haiti, Katrina, Sandy, going and working with different groups trying to get materials into the right materials into the theater and keeping the wrong stuff out. Yeah, and
doing all that from with all this technology help.
Yeah, from a technology perspective, how do we get, you think about, in when Katrina happened, there was, a company would offer a truckload of diapers, and then it's heading its way down to New Orleans, and they can't get there, and by the way, they don't really need them, but by the way, we're dealing with, as you Texans know, we're dealing with a whole lot of people resettled in Houston. Right. How do you, instead of making
go there instead of
use technology to head it off at the pass and get things where they really need to go. Oh yeah. So it was new for the sector, so it was a great
and was there any, I mean, how difficult is that too? Is there pushback from that? Because obviously it isn't just like, hey, I'm here to save you, and everyone goes, yay! And,
exactly.
It's probably not the way it went.
No, there's a lot of, when you think about, I think a lot of times in entrepreneurs, they think about disruption and, I think a lot of times you don't think about the faces and the people who really make a living on the things working the way they do.
Yeah.
And so,
and they're going to fight to keep them that way.
Yes. So even in disaster relief,
really,
this can be the case. And so we definitely I learned a lot about the political side of the equation and the community engagement side, not just the technical. It's much more than technology, and as is probably true for most businesses.
Sure. But how did you tackle that? How did you head that off and navigate that?
Right. So in that particular situation, in dealing with disaster relief, it involves government sector as well as business sector and community sector. So it involved going to Washington, D.C. and going to the Hill and working with congressmen and their staffs and trying to educate them on the right things to do, as well as working with corporations and then state and local governments. And you had to work and clearly express the situation to different members of society who maybe didn't come from a supply chain background.
Right.
But they can understand when there's people who are in desperate need and then there's way too much supply other places. Yeah.
Right. You put a face to it and a reason, the big why, I guess.
Absolutely.
That. So there was actually laws that you had to go in and deal with and navigate and get changed, or?
Yes, there's certain laws, and then there's sort of interpretations of laws. A lot of times laws aren't written extremely clearly, especially when it comes to technology becoming involved. Right. They were written for a time with paper files and, credentialing, allowing the right persons, controlling the right people coming into a disaster situation, or the right supplies versus the wrong ones. Well, instead of everybody having to have a paper certificate, what if they were credentialed on their phone, on the fly? Different things like that.
Yeah. That's fantastic. So that was a 15-year run
to do
that. Mm-hmm. And were you partnering with other organizations during all that? Would you consider them clients at that point, or partners, the ones you were getting that supply from and then distributing that? What kind of entities were they?
Sure. We would use the word partners a lot, but the idea is that we would treat everybody like a client.
Okay.
And we would say that, so the donors are our clients, and the charitable organizations are our clients, and the end people are our clients, and just to really try to stay in service mode all of the time. It was a great challenge trying to navigate the two worlds. A lot of times the corporate sector has a very prescribed way of doing things, and the social sector has a very prescribed way of doing things, and both for very good reasons. But trying to get folks to kind of come together in alignment for ultimately the good of the victims.
Right. Very interesting.
So
it's just like mind-boggling, just the scale and the scope of that to even.
Yeah, and then over time, it became a matter of not just how do we get the technology work, how do we actually get to help people, but now how are we going to pay for this thing?
Well, yeah. Right. Absolutely.
And so as we grew the network, technology is very expensive to build, and it's kind of expensive to put in, but it's really not that expensive to run. So as we could grow our network, we could accept payments from each of our contributing partners, and companies would pay more and nonprofits would pay less, but pay something. And then so through those different things, we backed into this idea of social entrepreneurship, where we created a viable enterprise over that time. Where we received some grants and things like that, but we received a lot of earned revenue. And it really became clear to me, watching how funding cycles came and went, and funders' interests kind of ebb and flow into different service areas, the real importance of creating earned revenue. And it's for-profit people maybe don't always identify with this, don't really appreciate that when they get revenue, it's unrestricted. Once they've paid the bills, they can do what they want with it, right? You know, in the nonprofit world, those of you who suffer through this realize there is no pivot for a nonprofit. You know, if a grantor gives you money to deal with, to help a certain population in, a certain population in a certain geography with a certain thing like education, if you get there and decide, they can't listen to me until they're fed and they're not sick anymore, so I'm not going to educate them now. I'm going to heal them up and I'm going to feed them.
Nope.
No, does not work, right? But if you earn your own money,
right,
now you can spend it as it's needed. So
and there's such power in that.
Absolutely, it's such a freeing thing. And so that's when we started in those later years looking at both different problems, but also different ways of funding ourselves. So we were not dependent.
So what was that? Describe that process, because you started out as a nonprofit, correct?
Absolutely.
So how did that transition happen?
Yeah, so I think part of the piece in growing over time and working with different individuals and business partners, we realized that the mechanics of what we had for-profit viability, or at least earn revenue viability. And so as we were looking at some of our new areas, we said, okay, let's write the rules differently this time. And in that, we actually had some resistance, and that sort of created our spinoff a couple of years ago, right? As we took, some of our team wanted to go do new, bigger, bolder things. And those of you who have nonprofit boards know that a lot of times they're maintaining the status quo is a lot more important. Unfortunately, as nonprofit boards in general are not incentivized to take risks.
Sure.
Right? Because they don't make any more money if the nonprofit serves more people, but if something bad happens, that can look badly upon them.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So so those of you who've been nonprofit executive positions know that frustration of wanting to grow, but sometimes not having that visionary leadership at your board. We came into some of those struggles of, wanting to move up the chain, both from not just technology, but how can we help create the social enterprise for what we're behind,
right?
And how can we solve some more root cause problems, not just why giving people food, but how can we stem the cause? Why are they hungry?
Yeah, exactly. So what were some of those revenue streams, or those potential revenue streams that you saw there's a reason to spin off and transition? What were some of those?
Yeah, so the revenue streams are really taking some of the things we had kind of come to over time, and then starting with those at the outset as we started again. So again, receiving grants and marketing dollars and showing the values to the corporations and the funders, but then with the clients, having everybody contribute something. So those are, and looking at, when we started doing this work, from 16 years ago, we had all of our clients running on common systems, and it was very rarely done. It was called ASP, and it was, and most companies didn't do it because I can't have my system being housed at the same place as my competitor.
Right.
That's ridiculous. I want my own servers and my own, and well, we didn't have that luxury. We were poor. We were nonprofits. So everybody's got to be on the same platform. Right. Well, all of a sudden, SaaS became a big deal, right? And
right.
And so over time, and so we actually, by necessity, one of the earliest adopters of things like Salesforce.com and the Force.com platform, and won development awards for that. And we worked with Microsoft in what was called Azure at the time, and in fact, before they even had a name for it, right? It was built out of necessity. But as we've grown into this new iteration, we said, okay, how do SaaS companies make their money? Right? And well, they do it through setup fees and project fees and then sustainable monthly recurring revenue streams. And so we said, okay,
maintenance and training.
Yeah. And so we said, how do they do it? All right. And we said, we're just not going to just do what they did, but understand how they work, and how do we want to make money in our space. And fundamentally, those are the same building blocks for how we make money. Now, we handle our clients maybe differently than some do in that space. We do a lot of things to try to protect our clients from being in a situation where they're paying more than they expect.
Right. Rather than just
trying to milk every dollar out
right.
of them, or encourage them to customize when they don't really need to, or sell a certain innovation to one client, and then when the next client wants almost the same thing, say, okay, let's start from a whiteboard. No, we say, yeah, we're starting to work on this project, and another client is interested in something similar. Are you willing to talk to this other group? Can we sit at the table and develop together?
Fantastic.
So taking our new version of
and all that can happen too when that end goal is that social entrepreneur side of things, is that
Absolutely.
social endeavor. You'll have that conversation. You'll have those people come together and be open to that.
Absolutely.
That's great. So you did transition eventually from that. At what point now? About what year are we? At the end of that kind of 15 years?
About 30 months. So we're about 30 months into the new venture.
Into the new one. But what year are we?
Yeah. So
at the end of that one
about 13 years in, we started to have the serious conversations about, is the board or is the organization's, what is its appetite for change and for thinking this way, and the interest in innovating in new areas, and then there was sort of a gradual process from there to realize that there was enough difference in approach. And then how do you create a healthy transition from an organization a few of us founded, to let that be successful with the stewards who wanted to stay, and then successfully take our new group.
Right, because you don't want to just collapse the other endeavor. Right. So how did you navigate those waters?
Slowly is the best. A lot of open communication. It's never perfect, because people want different things, and people, of course, would people like the status quo for a reason. So
sure.
But in the end, having good, honest dialogue, and where there's differences of opinion, and where you're not going to convince each other, is actually very freeing. Right, because I value this and you value this. So what do you value from this relationship?
Right. And
what do you value from the enterprise? And if you value these things and we value those, then off
there
we
you go.
Yeah.
Let's not talk about these things. We'll just concentrate on it.
Yeah, and not fight about not fight about trying to convince the other side about this. It's just, this is where this group has passion.
So and that's what's led to AdvanceNet Labs.
Yes.
And what was so besides being a for-profit, so that it can have that freeing power and do more with that, what was the founding piece to this?
Yeah, so interesting. When we started the new group, we also started as a not-for-profit.
Oh, really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so we still have the nonprofit, and it incubates ideas, and it works. It just from the get-go financially charges all of our organizations participation rates at different levels and things like that. But as we're sitting there working on that model and getting the business going, and we're growing, we were incubated by United Way. United Way Dallas has the only social innovation fund within the United Way family here in Dallas. So it's a real jewel.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so as part of that process, we had to pitch and all the stuff you entrepreneurs have done, right? We had our pitch and we won, and we got to be part of the accelerator. Part of that is one of the people that was in our pitch, at our pitch day, was a fellow named Rick Galloway, who was on the ground floor board. And Rick started volunteering and spending time with us. And then...
In what capacity?
As... really, at first, just unofficially. He was passionate and he was involved. And then the ground floor was supposed to give us a mentor, but this was the early days of the ground floor, and it was slow to come. And then they realized, Rick's just your mentor. So, which really gave us a time to take somebody. Rick was very passionate about the social sector, but really came from more of a venture capital and capital raise background. And over time, Rick earn the trust to really see all the stuff you nonprofit guys don't tell your for-profit funders, right? About what works and what doesn't. Hi, I'm from the private sector, I'm here to help, and you're like, that's not always help, right? I mean, Rick got to see the real mechanics of what we were doing, and he would watch us I always say, oftentimes nonprofits are the organizational equivalent of a poor person. poor person economics. A lot of times we make decisions that
on a scarcity
mentality, on the fact there's only so much cash flow. Right. And when you get for-profit business help, people will say, oh, why don't you just invest in this? And in 18 months, you'll be this farther. And you're like, dude, I don't have 18 months, right? I mean, that's, it's totally logical thinking. It just doesn't apply to my scenario.
Because I've got this runway and I'm not allowed to go and do this, and this.
Yes, right? Exactly. So Rick got to really see a lot of that. And
be frustrated and angry. And
right. He got to watch this happen. And he said, Keith, you should really look at securing some outside capital for this. And so we started some conversations about how his world from the venture capital world would raise and what would that look like. And we brought some other people into the fold. We pulled together some very fortunate, just people who've known our work for years and been advisors really applying to this. So we asked, Wright Conatzer and Bob Wright to come spend time with us, and George Ellis, one of the founders of Social Venture Partners, and David Overton from Opus Favio, and these amazing people in town who've been supportive of me for a long time under what we have been doing in the past, and to come together and help us really think about what would this look like in a what would a for-profit do. And so as we worked through those mechanics, we realized the right idea is to go ahead and create a separate for-profit organization and have it do the things that nonprofits usually pay for-profits to do. And in fact, stuff other nonprofits pay us to do, right? The rollout, the execution, the maintenance, and all that.
Right.
And leave the labs to ideate, to work on projects, to address those things where the market doesn't quite make sense yet, right? That's why the for-profit world isn't there, because they don't think they can make any money. Right. If they thought they could make money, they'd be there, right? So work on that
until
stuff.
That becomes something.
Yes.
Then it can go spin off and be,
Yeah, and so now the labs is doing that, and then as we've built these assets, now how do you take something that's of value, and in the nonprofit world, it would take us 15 years to get something done. How do we go let the for-profit world go and get real capital so we can grow much faster and pay off investors for coming in and getting on this journey with us, just like they would normally. And so we came to that point, and that's where we are today.
That's fantastic. So describe to us what that is, what you're doing with that. Some of those things that are in the lab, some of the things that are have rolled out in those initiatives.
Yeah. So the clearest one that's gone all the way through is in our education work. So we've built and acquired and assembled a bunch of very expensive education assets that the corporate world typically uses.
Like what?
Like a learning management system and a e-mentoring platform and a game-based learning piece of technology. So different things like that the corporate world uses to equip people, to get them hired, or to hire them, to move them up through the ranks in their company. How do we get those things and apply them to the social sector? So we've basically curated and produced what now for the nonprofit becomes a all-in-one solution that they can go implement. And so if they train people, even if they're just training their own staff, they now have a professional way to do that and keep track of certifications and such. Or we're curating specific knowledge and lessons and things like workforce development, technology skills, professional skills to go roll out. Well,
so not just providing a platform for a social enterprise, say, to go develop their own initiative and, like you said, hire people and stuff like that, but you're actually creating original education content as well.
Yeah, that's part of it too.
Okay.
Gathering and creating the right content and then getting it out. And then so we've built something of great value through the labs, but now the for-profit can go and do things we couldn't do as a nonprofit. We can go hire a large sales force. So we've got a great client. So in the United Way as one example, United Way in Dallas here is one of our clients, and they've really helped our product be so much better as we've gone out there and worked in area high schools for them and with partners, and then have their executives help us really get reporting and some of the business intelligence stuff together that a lot of other nonprofits don't have that kind of talent sitting around like they do at United Way. So we built this great thing. Well, there's 1,200 United Ways in the United States. Most of them do this type of programming.
Right.
So why don't we go help a lot more United Ways? Well, now as we can hire a sales force
And then they'll go sell to all these
Yeah.
areas that'll now purchase what was developed in labs.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And then we can, and it might take 18 months to be profitable. It's not going to be very long, but 18 months to be profitable again, which is nothing in the SaaS world like we're compared to, right? And the investors can get paid. They can get paid a good return for their money. We'll have impacted people. Let's say it's 100 United Ways is our first goal. We'll impact 100 United Ways in 3 years instead of 15. How many hundreds of thousands of people are we going to help that we wouldn't have if it took 15 years, right? And that's our driving passion. But I'm certainly glad to have our investors come along the ride and get them, paid a return for coming and joining us.
And that's what's so fantastic. And why is it so hard for people to wrap their heads around for-profit doing good? Why is that such a struggle?
Yeah, I think there is a mentality if you come from one side of the equation or the other, right? You're from the social sector. A lot of times there's a lot of mistrust of the for-profit world, right? So it's hard to see the good, and then even people who work in the corporate world, a lot of times they see that it's with their free time they go volunteer on the weekends. It's this thing we do that's different from our business.
It's a hobby.
It's a hobby, right?
Time.
Yeah. Even for the companies, it's a corporate hobby. It's like, we're going to take our people on a Saturday and build a house. What do people do? They're programmers. They're building a house. Is that really the best use of those programmers' time, right? And so instead of seeing the value, the social value in their business, right? That this thing that they sell all day long, that it can do good. In fact, it does do good, and we're going to make it do good for people who can't. The economic equation didn't quite fit yet.
Oh yeah. So, give me some human element to this a little bit. Who's being served at the end of this whole chain that you've created?
Sure. So one example. So sometimes we actually get to go work on the front lines, right? It's really not and that's where a lot of times it helps us really understand the nature of the problem. So we bring the right innovations versus what we think is a good idea, and so for example, a couple of years ago, one of my favorite students was a young lady named Destiny, and Destiny was not considered community college ready yet. So, but she wanted to be there. She wanted to improve her life. And one day, and so she's in our class, and our class is not the easiest at this point in that community college. It was not a 4-credit class yet, but the teachers encouraged them because they saw how valuable it was.
And what was this class? What was this?
We were teaching them professional skills with real corporate involvement, some corporate being taught, some of it online, some of it having professionals piped in real time from the corporate world, learning some things about basic jobs, computer-based jobs in the workforce. So rather than a professor bringing people from the workforce in to tell them what jobs were available, let them see and touch and see what was possible. And Destiny would, there was one night where she showed up 10 minutes late for class, all raggedy, because she had been thrown in jail the night before.
Oh gosh!
Right, and she would, and
she's still there.
Yeah, she's back. And there's a whole backstory about she was taking, she had family responsibilities at 17 that I never did. I'll say it that way.
Right.
And things, and how do you totally help someone like that change their trajectory of their life? And that's what these things can do. The community college believed in it so much, they rejiggered their curriculum to make that required. Not only a credit class, but it was required for matriculation, because they really feel like this is giving people the skills that then when they leave here, they can go get a job.
And that was something going on through the lab?
Yeah, we built that all through the labs.
Okay.
And now we have multiple sites where that program runs.
Oh, wow.
For different versions of that program, but it started with getting your hands dirty and being the lab, right?
Right.
Going out there and experimenting with things
seeing
and seeing what works. And that included Destiny, who put a lot of time in to help us have a much better system today.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So what's next? What's the next sort of big rollout or initiative or just plan of action?
Yeah, so a couple of things we're doing. So the first thing right now is we've sort of proven out our business model. We've got revenues on this education piece. We're taking care of customers. We've got great customers with a great name. So we're going. And then we've taken on the capital raise piece where we've really invested in doing a first class capital raise. Okay. So we've paid a decent amount of money to a great law firm to do a PPM and all this stuff I had to learn about for we're only looking for about $2 million for this round because the technology's built. We just need Salesforce to go get these customers that are lined up. So it's but we said we're still doing a kind of a first class financial ask, and then we're just doing our friends and family round. We're calling it right now, and then shortly after that, we've got our next set of institutional investors lined up that hopefully we'll close some of those, and so that's the phase we're at on that, which is pretty exciting. As we can grow that, then it's the hard work of signing up more customers and taking care of them. But I feel like we're good at that. Learning this whole. I never thought I would be an entrepreneur. I never realized I was an entrepreneur until I was well into it. You
looked at, wait a
minute. Look what happened. I wanted to do this thing that I thought could help people.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of come into it this way. But, what will be next for us after that is, as this is up and proving itself, is that we'll have more ventures. We have more things percolating in the lab already. That we could bring and spin off, but we're going to do we do quality work, so we're going to get this up and do a good job at this.
Sure.
And then we have the next things that are percolating in the lab that our team has developed ourselves. But I also fully expect, as we're doing well with this, is that other people are going to come to us with their great ideas and say, "Hey, would this fit in the lab? Could you help us turn this into
something?
Into a profitable, sustainable venture?" And we'll be very excited for that point too.
Oh yeah. Well, I love this. Love what you're doing. I think because that model just makes so much more sense. And I think now more than ever, people are open to it, especially obviously with the technology side. But even these two worlds merging so much, like people get it. People want. I mean, at a customer level, people want that more. They want that story in the shoes that they buy or anything like that. So I think we're finally getting to that place where it makes sense from a monetary level, and that whole cycle that you've got going is so repeatable. It's
Absolutely.
Just this, and you've got the 18 months, and you come back, and now let's do it again.
Let's do the next one. Yep,
that's fantastic because you really are impacting just innumerable amounts of people. Because you're impacting these organizations whose sole goal is to help, and I think that's huge. So
we're very excited.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's not hard to get up in the morning and get to work.
Right, I bet. Well, I would love to open it up to you guys. If you guys have any questions in the audience, only for him, not for me. I don't want to ask any questions.
So you talked about the food banks. Did you ever do it for animals as well? Is there any farm to?
Yeah.
The question just for the camera and the mic. Go ahead and repeat the.
Oh yeah. So the question: what work have we done with animals? So there's a couple of different places where this quickly applied. One of them is just in the pet food space. So we worked with a company who, I guess we could say it because it was a very successful thing. We worked with Purina, who was very excited about. They had been giving food sort of as a marketing piece.
Sure.
And not entirely altruistically in that. If you've ever bought a pet, if you've ever got a dog, whether you got it from the store or the shelter, well, what are you feeding the dog? Well, here at the shelter, we feed the dog Purina 1. Guess what you're going to feed that dog? So they were doing some things like that. But when they saw what we were doing with food, we were taking actually what was going to be waste and turning it into a viable food for people in need, then we were able to create a whole separate system for them to get food out to animal shelters and out of what was their surplus now and out of their so that was a treat.
Oh, wow.
The other implication was in disaster relief. This was new for me when we started doing disaster relief work. But the idea that people won't leave if they think they're going to lose their pet. right? And so this was extremely evident in Katrina and Rita and such. So working with the Humane Society of the U.S. and doing things around getting pet supplies, in fact, out so that people could take their pets when they had to evacuate and get their places. In fact, it's again in the what some people would consider unglorious role, and sometimes, but of everybody doing their part when the fertilizer plant exploded in West Texas. Oh, yeah. My niche assignment was to get pet food to the shelter in Waco to help them, because there was a lot of displaced animals around that section.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
stuff that you just don't ever think about.
Right,
That level. And she's definitely an animal person. She's played with lions. She's played with everything. We talked about that today. Anybody else? Questions? I know you got a question, right?
So, what advice would you give to someone looking to start a social enterprise today?
Yeah. So, I guess in terms of what advice I would give to somebody starting a social enterprise, the first thing I would say is do something you're passionate about, and don't just be in love with the idea of starting a business. Sometimes those are in the entrepreneur space, people who are sort of in love with the entrepreneur cycle.
Sure.
And they may not necessarily even be passionate about whatever it is that they're doing, which might be okay for certain businesses, though I don't think it is. It's certainly not in the social space. The work, in terms of the work getting done, the work only gets done, especially when it comes to change, because there's passionate people who push through what doesn't make the shortest term sense, but makes the longest term sense. And that takes a lot of effort and passion and the ability to work with humility and to work with people who come from a very different place.
That makes a lot of sense too, because you're looking beyond the normal barriers and difficulties already in starting something. That's just getting your word out. But then you have to do all of that and change someone's mind or an entire country or industry.
Right, and especially, and you don't
hard.
have the best tool that's out there. I tell my for-profit friends, they cheat. If you want somebody to do something, you pay them more money.
Right.
The people we're dealing with are not motivated by money. Right. They work at that shelter because they are extremely passionate about those pets, right? Or they care about that woman. One of our good friends, Buck Kern, runs a great organization called Snowball Express, and we would probably express how he validates whether he's going to do something. Is it good for the kids? Is it good for the kids? Does it make sense? And is it good for the kids? Right? I mean, those are the kind of people. Those are the kind of people you want to do business with.
Oh, yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Any other questions?
I have a challenge. Challenging question. I heard you say making a profit, changing the shift in the way that doing good profit companies do business and make a profit. How do we make that shift? How do we, as a nonprofit, philanthropic endeavors, make the shift to where this is a great idea, whether it's for profit or nonprofit, to get the organization, this is a great idea. And how do you make that shift? Just doing the idea.
Yeah, how do you get nonprofits to choose to adopt this profit mentality? It takes a lot of work, because the whole reason why people got there was not about the profit. All right, and I think it's really about helping people in your organization have an ownership mentality, right? And whether, in our case, we're starting to do some things where ownership actually means ownership and shares, right? But even if they're not motivated by that, I have people on my team that are excited we're doing this. They don't care a whit about how many shares they're going to get, right?
Yeah. It's the idea of it. So it's with the bigger picture of what that means.
Mm-hmm. And they want to know, they want to take care of does this mean I'm going to have more resources to care for these people? I'm going to have adequate staff to go do my training delivery?
Right.
Like, that's what they care about. Like,
right.
Keith, if all this crazy talk about doing a for-profit and share. Hey, if that's going to get me where I'm not totally strung out and way under-resourced trying to take care of my people, then I'm in.
Yeah.
But then that's what, and so trying to identify and really get them bought into why you're on this journey. And
because that's the thing too. It's at the end of the day. I mean, you go and you do that because you still got the same end goal, right? And you just concentrate on all those things that. Here's why. You get past the philosophical, oh my gosh, what does that mean if we charge or something like that, and you get to that precious goal that you started for in the first place.
Right. Yeah. And ultimately, I mean, if for-profit companies can have this as well as nonprofit, that spirit of we take care of the customer, right? How do you get your that's the easy part, right? Are you passionate? We know you are. You're not. You wouldn't have come here and worked for less and worked all these crazy hours and no admin support and the computers that don't work, whatever, if you didn't care about those people.
Oh, yeah.
And so just getting them bought in and with an understanding of this is how you are going to be able to help more people.
Yeah. It's Mr. Rick.
But Keith, is there a way that the for-profit, the new venture, could benefit the nonprofit?
Right. So the question is there a way that the for-profit can benefit the nonprofit? And in particular, in the structure that we've adopted, the largest single shareholder of the for-profit is the nonprofit. So it is retaining. So rather than owner equity or being so high or things like that, the nonprofit will own it, which means that from a dividends and back to unrestricted revenue, right? Yeah. The labs will now have more money to be the labs.
Oh, that's
and
fantastic.
So we're super excited about that model. We're even doing working on some other arrangements where some contracts relate in partial equity for nonprofits and things like that to be in that ownership with us. So,
oh wow, that's great. Very cool.
Do you know of any local resources here in Dallas that can help someone going towards social enterprise?
So that's a great question. So resources for local people. I would say, first of all, there is the ground floor at United Way. Whether you're you get chosen as an investee, or you can leverage the other learnings that they're creating for social ventures. There's opportunities to share your story. This is such from an entrepreneur community, this is such a collaborative space. I mean, the Grove itself is full of people, where we're sitting today is full of people who are willing to be very giving of their ideas. I'm thinking of one Grove member in particular, runs a company that's based here called Crowd Reason. They've been very instructive to us in our approaches. So coming to these type of places and seeking help there, I would also tap our universities around here are very giving. If you can, and not just in their undergrad, but they're skilled kind of graduate school folks of giving of their time. So if you want student groups to come help you build out a concept, we've had in one same year, we've had University of Texas at Dallas master's students helping us with our market approach, and at the same time, University of Dallas masters in accounting folks helping us with our business planning and our financial structure.
Oh,
so
wow.
Those are a couple of different resources, and I'll also give you my card too.
It's certain incubator here around, run by a certain Kimberly O'Neill, called Cause Studio, is quite the resource as well. Anybody else? Questions? Well, awesome. Thank you so much for being here. What's the best way to keep up with AdvanceNet Labs and
absolutely
track you down?
Yeah, right. So if you're a tweeter, you can tweet me at KR Thode or at AdvanceNet Labs.
Okay.
And you can certainly, the website is advancenetlabs.org still, and we
Awesome.
have some of our domestic violence work is out there on Facebook, and so yeah, catch up with us there.
Yeah, you've got an initiative, Safe Night.
Yes.
Describe that to me real quick.
Yeah, sure.
Because I thought that's just an incredible.
Yeah, so
platform.
Safe Night is a collaboration that we started with a group in California called Caravan Studios, and together, we've developed this app, and the idea is that a lot of times when someone gets the courage to leave their home because they're in an abusive situation, or the police have shown up and they said these people can't stay together.
Right.
When they call, a lot of times, about 40% of the time, the shelter can't take them.
Wow.
The shelter's either full, or it's a woman with a teenage boy, and the shelters aren't equipped to take men, or sometimes it is a man. Well, at the same time in Dallas, there's 11,000 hotel rooms open tonight. Right. So what we can do with the app is that the shelter can go secure a hotel room and then put out a ping, via our app. And if you've downloaded our app, the app will let you know, if you give me $69.13, I can put a woman in a room tonight. Will you make the donation?
Wow.
And the donation denigrates and takes that room away, and then the shelter knows they can place somebody.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Love that.
What is the app called?
The app is called Safe Night, all one word, and you can find it on any of the major Play stores. So if you can download it and register for one of our Texas shelters, such as Women Called Moses out in Duncanville, or the Salvation Army, we've got 8 shelters alive on it now. And in fact, they just next week, they are going to use a new technology that Caravan Studios and we are releasing, that's called Find a Bed, and that lets the shelters instantly share on open capacity with each other.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we're very excited about that.
Are these just shelters or safe houses as well?
Yeah, so the good question. So Safe Night is domestic violence shelters come in, and so it's and they're all each individually kind of pre-approved and vetted, and we work with them. Now sometimes the safe houses will work in collaboration with the shelters, who really have the capacity to do quality intake, right? Because it's not just like we've been approached by police forces wanting this because of the good work they do that people don't hear about and they cover, but it's not just putting someone in the room. It's knowing that then they're under the care, that puts them under the care of somebody, right?
Gotcha.
Who can go deal with all of the other issues that have to happen for that person, not just getting them in the room.
Right.
Have you done that for many nights?
Yeah, so we are over 775 safe nights we provided between the Safe Night app and a couple of other ancillary technologies we've got.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Love it.
And you link up with other organizations that are doing similar, providing services. Like
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of partnerships, well, clearly, like with the Safe Night app, we are not the heroes. We're providing the technology, but it's these local shelters that are really they're dealing with the tragedy at the moment. They're qualifying the people. They're getting them into the right care. We're just providing the technology and connecting the donors to the immediate need.
Is there a particular type of training that these individuals have when a woman and child comes through the door? Is that certain training, social?
Absolutely. Yeah. So part of what's really important is to work with, for us, is to make sure that we're working with qualified agencies who have folks that are trained on that whole intake and care process. And in fact, one of the other, back where our streams are crossing is on this education platform. We're now actually starting to educate both domestic violence survivors to give them skills to start their new life, which we're super excited about.
Wow.
But also to the agencies themselves, those people need to be trained, and there's a lot of turnover and change there, and those people can't wait 60 days to be trained. The phone's going to ring now. So getting them all trained and tracking all their validation of their training, the state has some guidelines around making sure that agencies have that training, and so our systems are helping show that without it being such an administrative burden.
Right.
And the system will go remind people so that they stay current on their training and all that stuff too. So
how is revenue streams generated from that? Because I hear you talk about integrated systems, and you got all these agencies working together. How does your app generate income for any of these agencies? Kind of share that.
Yeah, sure. So there's different things. So for the Safe Night app, those, if you're donating specifically for the Safe Night to meet that Safe Night, then your money's going towards that hotel room, and that's it. The credit cards get their a little bit of processing clip gets taken away, but so the shelters don't really get any money other than if they were going to spend money out of some other pocket, right? But they now have, with the donor's permission, if they learn about New Friends, New Life, or Chaitna, or Women Called Moses, then they can receive kind of additional information about them, and then they may choose to donate to them. So
Gotcha.
and it's important for us. So we appreciate getting the chance to speak at places like this, because we're out there trying to recruit the donors for the shelters and for this need, so the shelters aren't shifting a donor who was giving to something else to now funding the hotel room, but can we bring a new donor in? And we're very passionate about that. And then in terms of funding the education piece, the shelters have some budget for that, and the states provide some budget that sometimes can get used for that. So that's really, in terms of social enterprise, again, we're in the education sector first because there's, from a profitability standpoint, there's more money available there.
Right.
But it allows us, now we have the platform in place, so some of these things, like, we're never really going to make a ton of money off of lining up given hotel nights.
Right.
We're not, and that's great. That's fine. But we've got other parts of the business that keep us
And the
running.
relationships and the inner workings, you're right in there with them already, so you can make all that work.
Oh, that's so,
Yeah.
you're so right. It works. It's earning the right to be heard about these other things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My next question, being that this is information gathered, measurable outcomes, can that be used as a collaborative grant?
Yeah, so it's a great question about what about the information. And yeah, the idea is that we capture all kinds of information that at rates and closest to the source that's never before really been done as you digitally capture all the information. And that provides these agencies the chance to make much more compelling grant grant requests, and to go back to donors, show their real impact. And for those higher performing agencies, it really gives them an opportunity to differentiate themselves.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Great point. Awesome.
Have you ever asked nonprofits to come to you and like sit in a room and say, what issues do you have that we can help you solve?
Yeah, so the question is, do we ever bring nonprofits together and ask what problems we can solve? We don't usually do a complete greenfield. It's usually around a topic because we've got an asset, or we've got some funding, or we've got some direction. Now, from that standpoint, the whole idea of the Safe Night app started from that sort of collaboration of this thing that's actually getting released now, where the shelters kind of share each other's space. That was our original piece. In fact, the group in California, Caravan Studios, asked me to come help develop because I'm this inventory guy, right? I can get mac and cheese where it needs to go and stuff like that. So if Keith can get mac and cheese to where to go, maybe he can get a woman to the right shelter space. And so that's where we started. And then we started talking with the shelters about it and how it would work and all of that. And then this idea for the app, for the fundraising app for the hotel nights came up, and we shared that with them. Hey, here's something we're kicking around with later. And they said, wait. We're always full anyway. Do that thing with the hotels first. And it totally, 18 months of work, totally got replaned or redone because we were a few months in, and the one thing we just totally shifted course because of what the experts really said. We do need to do more greenfield. And any ideas, if you want to sit and share, I would love to hear them.
Wonderful. Keith, thank you so much.
The Safe Nights is fantastic. I've not personally had that experience, but have watched me going through. Sometimes in the middle of the night, or while they're in court, having to get them out. And what's so very key there is that there's a window many times when they will agree to leave. We don't always freely walk away from abusive situations. And there's that critical window when they say, yes, I'll go to a safe place. And so it's wonderful. The issue has been for years that there was no place to take them.
You are so right about that.
So I thank you. There are more women in prison in Texas than any other state, sadly. So thankfully, more individuals contribute.
Yeah. No, you're very, very right about that. It's, and the heartbreaking thing, like having the chance to sit in the agencies and with one of the hotlines, and is watching someone take down somebody's information, and then saying, and it's like 10 minutes of trying to qualify. Dallas at least has this thing of like, if you're too high in a lethality assessment they do, then the shelter is not allowed to tell you no, because if they do this person pours their heart out and explains their situation, and then for the woman, it's always a woman who's fielding these calls, says, "I'm sorry, I can't help you. Here's 3 more phone numbers."
Right.
Oh.
And hang up.
Oh.
And if Jason was calling the Holiday Inn over here and looking for a room for he and his kids for the weekend, if the Holiday Inn was full, would the Holiday Inn say, "I'm sorry, Jason, we're full. Let me give you a few numbers you can call and see if maybe that," and that's not even pouring your heart out.
Right.
Holiday Inn would say, "Hey, we're full. Please hold. Let me transfer you to the Staybridge Suites down the street here." Right? And that's, so again, the for-profit world has ways to do these things. And you just see, that painful, that intake process, and you can't not do something.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Keith, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
This has been awesome. Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you.
It's Saturday night.
It was Saturday night and I'm feeling kinda silly. Winter coat on cause the air was chilly, but I'ma make my way out to the record spot. Gotta find some new breaks for the beats to rock. I gotta come with the flavor like some lifesavers. On now and late is Dr. Beatmaker. If I'm a player, it's like your tape deck. And if you miss the gig, then take a rain check. Stacks of wax piled high to the ceiling. Need a U-Haul truck if I would think about stealing, but it's not my steed, so I commence with the digging, no kidding. Something that'll keep the beats hitting what I'm getting. So much to choose from, bro.